Well, good evening, Australia. Thank you so very much for taking the time to jump on this webinar with us. We're pretty passionate about this topic. I want to give you a little bit of a layout of how this is going to roll out tonight, and to make sure that this is a value for the time that you're committing to us. As most of you know, I am Baron Hoig. I am the executive director of OneChiropractic in the Chiropractic Defense Council. We've now been working in Australia going on 4 years. We came in during COVID, and we're very, very pleased. And Samir and I have some definitely some war stories during that period of time of some crazy calls and crazy times. But we were honored to be able to defend the rights of practicing chiropractors and allied health during that time. Since then, things have definitely morphed, and we've been taking on more of the bigger issues that have been facing the chiropractic profession in Australia for a period of time. One of them being primarily the censorship that we believe exists in Australia, limiting your ability to communicate the truth about chiropractic, being hammered by opera, with things that you put on your website or things that you put on your social media channels. And so we started working with that about a year and a half ago. We will give you a brief update about that and where things stand, because it looks like we're making some positive headway there. And the other issue, obviously, that started was the pediatric policy that began in 2019. That's going to be the majority of our talk today, and sharing with you where things are at, what the plan is. I'm also extremely blessed and thankful that Dr. David Cahill, former president, current vice president of the Australian Chiropractic Association, is willing to jump on tonight so that you can hear directly from him on what's going on from the ACA's perspective, our collaborative efforts and the communication that we've had on this particular issue. And then, of course, we have our lead solicitor, Samir Banga, that will be talking from his perspective with our senior barristers, the things that we're doing, both from the censorship issues as well as from the pediatric policy. So our goal tonight is to give you a very good glimpse of where we're at today, and then what we believe is coming down the road, and why it is absolutely essential that our profession come together right now and be organized, because we believe we're headed for an opportunity for us to take back our narrative. And that's really going to be the gist of what I want to talk with you about here in the beginning. So most of you, I know, because a lot of you ask me about it when I'm over in Australia, and I've gotten a lot of texts and emails about it. You guys love the drama that the United States has in our political system. It's entertaining, I'm sure, for you guys to watch the insanity that happens over here in the States. But I want to use as an example what happened with our recent election. I have to believe everyone over there is aware of our election and Donald Trump getting reelected into office. But aside from just who won and lost in that and the implications that might have on the rest of the world, there was something very specific that happened in this particular race that has never really happened in the history of the United States. And I don't know if it's happened anywhere else around the world, that I really want to use as a case example of what has to happen in Australia in the chiropractic profession. And specifically what happened probably in the last third of the political race in the United States, you started seeing Democrats, like lifetime rivals to Donald Trump, all of a sudden starting to come over and support him and put their biases aside and maybe their differences aside, and let their commonalities be the primary reason for them to come together. One of the biggest example is Robert Kennedy Jr., and he had sued Donald Trump multiple times in the past, and obviously came from a very democratic mindset, and Trump was anything but that. But yet in the end, he gave up all of those reasons to dislike Trump to look at the biggest issue, which was to make America healthy again, and believe that Trump had the best opportunity to get that done. So he all of a sudden forgo his campaign as presidential candidate and decided to jump in bed with Trump because he believed that was the best path to get America where he believed it needed to be. I need people to understand the magnitude of that, because he left half of his family, disowned him, that were staunch Democrats. He did what he thought was best for the country, and it worked, because his support coming over to Trump brought a lot of people. It changed a lot of minds. This sounds trivial, but it was RFK Jr. that changed Joe Rogan's mind and get Joe Rogan to all of a sudden support Donald Trump, which would have never happened before. There's implications when we have people that put aside their biases and say we've got to come together for the greater good. That's what has to happen in Australia right now. That's a real life example that just happened a few months ago. That if the chiropractic profession would understand how important it is for us to organize and come together and put aside our biases, put aside our preconceived ideas of the past, whatever your view is of the ACA in the past is not relevant today. Whatever your opinion might have been about joining the CDC, it's not relevant for today, because right now we have a huge opportunity as a profession to take back the narrative of what chiropractic is in Australia. And the opportunities ahead of us that may look like hurdles or may look like trauma or may look like bad things create opportunities for us to stand and speak about the truth of our profession. So I don't ever look at these things as negatives. I look at them as potential positives. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about as we get into the details of what's going on with this pediatric policy. So that's the gist of what I want to hit you guys with tonight. And understand, we are looking at all of this as a phenomenal opportunity for chiropractic to organize, come together, and take back the narrative of what chiropractic is throughout all Australia. And the ripple effect of that is going to be unmeasurable, because we have the truth on our side. And when we can actually organize and we're all saying the same thing, going in the same direction, history has shown us that we're unstoppable. And that is exactly what I believe is time. I believe God is creating this perfect time in history for us to be able to stand up, speak our truth, and be able to take back the health of the country. So before I get too much into the pediatrics, Samir, I do want to talk a little bit about what's going on with our censorship issue so that people know what's going on. And as a reminder, for those of you listening, we have been encouraging you for the last year and a half to start speaking chiropractic in all of your social media and all of your websites. We've given you places where you can go and get information that we vetted to make sure that if you were challenged, we could support it. Websites like Dr. Heidi Havoc's, websites like the New Zealand chiropractic website that they put out to the general public, websites like the Foundation for Chiropractic Progress, which has a relationship with the ACA. And they have just a huge amount of materials that give substantiation to chiropractic. And we've been encouraging you guys to start going out there and saying that, knowing that it would get the attention of AHPRA. You would likely be contacted by them, telling them that you're doing something that violates the policy, so that it gave us an opportunity to defend what you're doing and educate AHPRA on what's been going on. So Samir, if you want to kind of give a little bit of an update on a few of the cases that we've had and the success that we've had, and that our strategy is working, we just need it to get bigger. So go ahead and share with everybody.
So ultimately what we're doing requires power. It's effectively power in numbers. Now, as everyone's probably aware of, AHPRA don't allow testimonials, and I think it's section 131, I just can't remember at the moment, but there's particular rules about advertising, misleading, etc., etc. But testimonials are what AHPRA seem to dislike the most. Now, we've had some practitioners, some chiropractors who have effectively, they've found a middle ground, a gray area, which is to use it, as Baron would describe, as a widget or some kind of plug-in on your website or whatever it may be, your Instagram or whatever it may be, which shows Google reviews rather than copying and pasting a testimonial someone gives you. This is effectively that gray area, because that testimonial is no longer by you. That's a review that's already public, and that's a review this person or anyone in the public, any general member of the public, could access anyway. We're basically encouraging people to get into that gray area to see how far they can take it. And ultimately, yes, AHPRA have come back at some of our practitioners, but some have actually gone through without being contacted as well. There's a number that have already tried, but even with the ones that have been contacted, there's a few that AHPRA have backed down on, depending on what's being said and how it's being said. Now, ultimately, the other things that we've been looking at is some of our practitioners have posted videos. These are videos of, I guess, you guys in practice, videos explaining certain issues and certain benefits of chiropractic assistance, I guess I'll call it. Now, ultimately, AHPRA have targeted some of these practitioners as well by saying certain videos contain, I guess you could say, content that is misleading, and we've targeted a few of those, and luckily we've had some success with that too. Now, what you find is with chiropractors in general, AHPRA are quite strict, but when you push back a little bit, and if you're able to say, show studies or connect it to studies or connect it to some kind of literature, AHPRA automatically start backing down. They don't like certain words, which says that we're going to cure your ailment, for example. But if you speak about being able to assist or maybe able to assist correct your wedding, that I shouldn't say correct your wedding, but ultimately that gets through, and APRA can't really do much about it because they can't then claim you're misleading. We've had a number of people come to us with issues around that, and we've only got a couple of cases that are still actually in motion at the moment, which has been quite good because APRA's backed down on most of them. What we've ended up doing is engaging with APRA, giving our practitioners some strategies to deal with it, which is the biggest one has been actually including studies. So if you're advertising, for example, if you're advertising a particular treatment or for a certain condition, how you word it and having studies involved or having access to studies, say you hyperlink it down the bottom, has been very successful. If you just generally publish videos, for example, about treatment, what you say in that video also is what APRA actually looks at that. So if you do that carefully and you don't actually mention that you can fix something, will fix something, that also assists as well. So we try to give strategies to bring you into the gray area, because ultimately there's a lot of holes here. And APRA themselves don't actually understand what they're enforcing at times. For example, with testimonials, it's very easy if someone says, Joe Smith, you've done a great job. I think you're a great chiropractor, and you copy and paste that and put it on your website under the heading or on the website, on the web page, testimonials. That is clear. That's a clear breach. But if someone puts that on Google, they're allowed to do it. They're allowed to have an opinion. And if you don't actually copy and paste that, but you have another way of showing that, you have no control over what's said. Because if someone says something negative as well, that is also going to show with the Google review. But I'm using Google reviews as an example. There are other mediums, and understand there are other places where you can get reviews as well, and where your clients and patients can actually post information about you. So ultimately, we're trying to get that middle ground. We're trying to find that gray area, and a lot of practitioners are having success with that. But to really push on, we need numbers. We need more people trying it, because ultimately right now, they're trying to figure out where they're at. The more people that push back, the harder it is for them. If they're targeting one practitioner, it's so much easier to put your resources into that one practitioner's case. If they're challenging 1,000 or 2,000, firstly, they're going to have to change the legislation. But secondly, they're going to actually have to back down, because they're not going to be able to come after everyone. And if 1,000 practitioners have the same understanding of what is allowed, APRA automatically is going to have to back off, because they do not have the resources to come after everyone. That's clear. We found that during COVID, actually. When we did it when we're quite methodical in how we did certain things and how people implemented strategies, when there were enough people, APRA, or at that time it could be the Department of Health, had very, very little power. It was much easier if they were targeting one person or one organization, or just a small number of organizations. And in certain states, that actually worked really well. In certain areas, it worked really well. There were certain areas where it was harder. For example, in the Northern Territory, it was difficult because, Baron, we didn't exactly have many people up there. We had one person I remember in particular, but we didn't have strength in numbers. New South Wales, it was easier. Victoria, it was easier. But then again, it also did come down to the actual, not just the state, but the suburb that that person could be in. Do you want to take it further, or
No,
do
that's
you want to
great.
jump
Yeah,
in
I just
there?
wanted to reiterate that we are having success. And those of you listening, I know you hear me in my videos and stuff. I wanted you to hear it right from the guy that's doing the work and his team. And I can't reiterate to you enough. And I know I'm the crazy American, and I own that title well. I'm actually proud of it. It's a badge of honor. But the power of coming together and working together. And here's what, even if there's a spy that's on this webinar right now, or this video recording gets to someone that's not a fan of what we're doing, I want to be very, very clear. We are not asking you to break any laws. We are not asking you to be a rebel without a cause. What we're asking you to do is to organize and come together and take our narrative back. Chiropractic has been watered down because of the mechanisms they use to cause you to fear telling the truth. And we're not going to allow it to happen anymore. I don't know how else to say it. I love this profession enough to be the person to tell you, let's go. You are not alone. We have your back. We will support you. We've been supporting you. We will continue to support you. But I can't do it if you're not willing to do it as well. And so I just wanted, thank you, Samir. That was a great summary. We are going to continue to fight this. We are going to continue to educate opera, because what they're doing, their interpretation of the policy is incorrect. And we are going to continue to push and make sure that the truth of chiropractic continues to get put out there, so that more Australians can see chiropractic as a choice for them to be able to give them the highest quality of life. So I appreciate that. So awesome. Thank you, Samir, for that summary. All right, guys, now we're going to dig into the pediatric policy. There's already been a couple of questions here that, and Dave, I'm going to have you correct me if I say any of this incorrect, but one of the questions is, how did we get here? How did this issue become an issue? Where did it start? How did it happen? So I'm going to do a very, very brief, but clear explanation of how we got to where we are today. Most people think this started in 2019, and it started from an online video of a chiropractor holding a baby upside down, and groups like FOSUM and the medics got a hold of that and made a big media storm about how dangerous it is for chiropractors to see children. This actually started before that. My understanding is this actually started back in the 70s. There was an attack against chiropractic with pediatrics. Didn't generate any type of policy at the time, but it was a narrative that was put out there to start cracking the armor of the efficacy and effectiveness and safety related to chiropractic care. Then in 2019 is when they initially got enough of an organization. And yes, it's groups like FOSUM, groups like the medics, the pediatricians, people that are jumping out saying that these are poor little children, and the chiropractic adjustment is so violent that they're just not capable to be able to handle or withstand the force of a chiropractic adjustment. We all know that's garbage, and we know that chiropractors don't adjust that way on children, but it doesn't change the narrative that they created. At that time, there was enough of a political involvement that the chiropractic board, to my understanding, they even didn't really want to do it, but did create a policy. And the policy was very clear. The policy did not say that chiropractors should not see children. It didn't say you couldn't adjust them. It simply said delivering a high velocity, low amplitude adjustment to a child 2 and under. It was very, very clear on what it could or couldn't do. However, publicly, to anyone that doesn't even understand what velocity and amplitude means, it appears that there's a safety issue with chiropractors adjusting children. That's how it's going to be translated. That's how it was translated by those that were proud of that policy. And it got put in place in 2019. The ACA obviously did their job of making the board aware of that, the inappropriateness of that policy. Over the years, they put a lot of effort into educating the board as to why that policy is not necessary. We got involved after the COVID stuff. In about 2022, we started looking into this policy, if I believe so, Samir. That's when we started looking at it from a legal perspective and the efficacy of it. And we started putting out videos stating that we were going to go after this, and we were looking at the potential of doing a restraint of trade case. And it started getting public. The ACA did a great job of continuing their conversations, amping up. I don't know what it was that ultimately caused the change. I'm not taking credit for that. I am going to say that noise always makes something a bit more visible. And so between what the ACA was doing, what we were doing, and others were doing, for whatever reason, in November of 23, they did reverse the policy. And they took it away, which was great news. We were still going to continue to look into this. We did a lot of work. We paid for senior solicitors to look at this, for barristers to look at it. Again, because our concern was the policy should have never been put in place in the beginning. It did have an effect on the ability for chiropractors to see children. It definitely dampened our public perception, and we felt that needed to be addressed. And then with the Safer Care Victoria information and how all that went down, and how the power of that study was actually ignored, and the narrative was still that there's potential safety and efficacy issues with pediatrics, we just felt like we needed to be able to tell our side of the story. And so we were looking at making a bit of a splash to be able to go out from a PR perspective and tell our story. So that's all that was happening after November, once the policy was reversed. Then in the summer of this year, obviously the media got a hold of that policy being reversed, like early March, April. And then the health ministers got involved and forced the chiropractic board to do an interim renewal of that policy until the health ministers could evaluate and understand what was going on with this policy and to determine if it was necessary or not. So then the interim policy got put back in place. exact same wording. Nothing changed with what that policy said. It was exactly what was from 2019. But this time the chiropractic board did not agree with it, but they had a decision. They could either defy the health ministers and take it out of their hands, or they could comply and hopefully work to defend their position of why the policy was reversed to the health ministers and then get it reversed again. So that's kind of where we're at right now. And we're waiting for the health ministers to actually determine if they believe this policy should stay in place or not. Where we have been trying, it's funny because every time I turn around with Samir and our team, it's like, well, okay, wait, here's a new angle. Here's something new that's happening with it. And we have to kind of go back and reassess the current climate to see if it affects our position at that point. I don't know, Samir, we've spent probably 20, 30 grand already just getting opinions on this matter to this point. Is that, yeah, because more than that. Okay. So we've been trying to position ourselves to be prepared. But before I get into our stance, Dave, why don't you kind of correct anything that I might have said that was inaccurate? That was a very Cliff Notes version of everything that's been going on. But then also share your guys' perspective and kind of where things are at from the ACA as to where we are currently, please.
Okay, thanks, Baron. Samir, thanks, everyone. Thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to be able to communicate to all the people that you have on this webinar about what's going on and where it's currently at. Because we've seen some things in the past few days which are, a little inaccurate, and I understand why. Because this is a really this is an issue that touches the very heart of what we do. The current situation is we don't know how this is going to go, but what we're doing at the ACA, what we've been doing, what we've ramped up since June, is meeting with all the health departments and the health ministers. And as you said at the start, Baron, every kind of situation can be looked on as a negative, or it can be looked on as opportunity. The opportunity here has been to enhance our relationship with the health departments in every state and territory in Australia, and help them to better understand what chiropractors are, what chiropractors do, how safe chiropractic is, the real results out of the Safer Care Victoria review, which was different to what the recommendations ended up being, and how that was a massive show of, number one, no evidence of harm, and number two, extraordinary public interest and support and endorsement of what we do, and endorsement that what we do helps children. Now, when you start to look at effectiveness, they start to say, well, what if it's not effective? How can we have something being done that potentially is not safe if it's not effective? So you need to show a level of effectiveness. Well, the level of effectiveness, request looked at, or the bar was set in the Cochrane review very high, at like RCTs and meta-analyses, and very little healthcare would be done on children if the bar was set at that across the board. So that's applying a standard, or looking to apply a standard for us to prove effectiveness that's not being applied anywhere else in healthcare, which is plainly unfair and ridiculous, and flies in the face of the consumer's right to choose healthcare of their choice, particularly if there's no evidence of harm. So we've been working hard. We've been having meetings every week, every second week with the health departments. And I've got to say, we believe we're making ground, particularly in some states. It varies state to state, I'd have to say, but we're getting heard. We're getting a good hearing, particularly in some. And as I said, we're making ground. So we're hopeful that the ministers won't and cannot override the board. If the board comes back and recommends to them that the policy should be taken away, like it was last November, it requires a unanimous front from all the health ministers in the territories and states in Australia to override that and change the national law. That would be an extraordinary step. Number one, to have them all come together would be pretty exceptional. But number two, they'd be making a decision not based upon evidence. They'd be making a decision based upon public perception, not even public perception, a perception of a small group of agitators who don't like chiropractic, And so it would be an extraordinary precedent for health ministers to do that. And we're respectfully and we've got to be very careful to nurture our relationships here. And they're not bad people; they're good people in these positions, and they just haven't had a good understanding of chiropractic. They've been unaware of what we do. And the great thing is, many of our members have been contacting their local members, federal members of parliament and state members, and some of them have had them come around to their practices and look at what they do. And in every single one of those situations, the outcome's been extraordinarily positive. Now, the outcomes from that, you never know where that goes. So what we've created, or anyone on this call who's a member, and I've got to say, if you're not a member of the ACA and you're not a member of the CDC, please become a member, because currently we sit at 42% of registered chiropractors in Australia members of the ACA. Now, so we represent the profession. There is another association out there that you'd be aware of. Now, they've come out and said that spinal manipulation on children under 2 shouldn't be done. So they're agreeing with the policy. Now, if we've got health ministers hearing from them, that's not going well for us. So the ACA needs the mandate from a large percentage of chiropractors being members gives them. So please, if you're not a member, reconsider that and support the organisations that support what you value, and don't support ones that don't. So where was I? Yeah, if you go to our website, the member section under pediatrics, under resources, there's a pediatrics hub, and in there you'll find everything you need to contact your member of parliament. It's got stuff you need to swat up on when you have the conversation. It's got a basic template for you to word yourself, but it's there for you to write to them. And if you write to we shouldn't be scared to write to our members of parliament. They're there to represent us. And what we're finding through this is they're coming back to us. So if you're wondering, what on earth can I do? I want to do something. This situation is just keeping me awake at night, and I'm not in a leadership position. Well, this is what you can do. And as I said, we've had some awesome examples of that happening and making significant ground. I won't mention the people by name. So please go to that. So this is really a call for action. While it hasn't been adjudicated upon, which is right now, is our opportunity to do this. So we want letters, and we've also got examples of letters of how do you communicate with your members, your people that come in to see you, how they can then write letters. Because the more letters that they write saying chiropractic care has done this and this and this and this for my family, particularly perhaps with their children, it matters. Politicians, numbers count, and what people believe counts to them, because bottom line, they need votes. So this is our opportunity. Once this decision gets sort of made and we don't know which way it'll go, then we have less opportunity to influence it. Okay, we'll fight, and we're preparing for every scenario. And part of that is obviously being in great communication with the CDC and Barron. And it wouldn't be right for me to share all our strategy of particular scenarios, but we're preparing for that. But this is our opportunity, and we need everyone to get on board right now. So please go to the material, get to work, and it doesn't take long. And if you're unsure, we've had quite a few members do that and then come back to us and say, "Oh my God, I got a letter back from the member of parliament. What do I do now?" We're here to help you. We know exactly what to do. We can help. We can let you know exactly what to say, and even potentially be there with you. Okay, so please take that as a call to action. And one last thing I do want to add, because you brought it up before in what you're talking about with the portraying chiropractic. we really want people to be careful with videos. Showing videos of you adjusting, the difficulty with that is it doesn't have the context around it. Now, we adjust people after a consultation, an examination, everything that goes with that, and that person's ready to have an adjustment and so on. If you're showing videos of you adjusting people and it cheapens it, it turns it into a crack. And many politicians and bureaucrats who advise the politicians have said to us, we just see those videos and we think, oh my God, because they haven't had the context around it. If they've never been to a chiropractor, they don't understand that it's just not getting people and cracking and racking them, So please, we would rather there's no videos of adjusting. Put everything else in, but not that, and particularly videos of adjusting children. My goodness. Even if it's supremely gentle, it just, what we think looks okay sometimes doesn't look okay to others. And it does us harm. Those few videos have done us enormous harm. So please think twice before you put videos of yourself adjusting.
Perfect. Doc, there was a couple questions that from what you had just said that I want to do. One question, and I don't know if you can answer this or not, but which states are responding favorably from the health ministers? You said some are more favorable than others.
Yeah.
Are you comfortable saying that, or?
No, I'm not.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't think you were, but I didn't want this person to think we ignored their question. And let me explain why. And I don't disagree with him. Obviously, saying what state identifies the actual individual, which puts a target on their back from the other health ministers that may not be with it. So please understand, it's not about being coy. It's not about sharing. But I hope you guys can appreciate the sensitivity of the work that's being done. And I want to say one other thing. There is a distinct difference between the way that the ACA communicates and the way that I communicate. And that's intentional. Please know that, and know that we have respect for each other and the roles that we both play. It's good cop, bad cop. I need them. We need them. The profession needs them to maintain these political relationships. And to do that, it's very hard to draw a hard line on anything. So when you hear Dr. Cahill talking in a little bit of a softer tone, it doesn't mean that he is not just as pissed off. It does not mean, and I'm speaking for you here, Doc, but that it doesn't mean that the ACA isn't just as irritated and the ACA isn't just as adamant. The role that they play has to be different. It's no different than the way you act in church versus the way you're acting at the pub. You're still the same person. You just have to act a certain way in the environment you're in. They are in a much more political environment where there are really very few red or whites and blacks. It's just, there's a lot of gray. And when you operate in gray, you got to save your space and you got to maintain relationships. So I hear that all the time when I'm going around. I hear it here in the United States with some of the associations here where people are like, well, they should be taking a harder stance. If you want them to be ineffective with any other issue, then maybe they could. But we were created to be the hardline people because we don't operate on that political level. We operate on the level of poking the bear a little bit so that we can create conversation so groups like the ACA can do the work that they're built to do. So please understand that. The other question that came in, Doc, was what percentage does the other organization represent? You mentioned a little bit represent the organizations that do that. What do you have any idea what that looks like?
I don't off the top of my head. I don't. Might be 10%. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Definitely. I'm going to tell you definitely smaller from the work that we've done.
Oh yeah. Oh, it's a lot smaller. Absolutely.
Yeah. But here's what people need to understand. Doesn't matter how small it is. When you're talking to politicians, if they say they're a chiropractor, then it represents all of chiropractic, right? If they're an organization in chiropractic, it represents all of chiropractic from that individual politician. And then when you have two chiropractors saying something completely different and polarizing, as in this particular case, one saying, yes, we agree that children 2 and under shouldn't have an adjustment, and another one saying absolutely not, the politician's going to be like, how many chiropractors are there? Oh, there's 6,600. They're like, well, get your guys' crap together and then come back because you're too small of a profession to have dividing opinions like that. So that's part of the frustration when it comes to doing that type of work. And so, it is very important that you understand who you're supporting. And I'm not dogging any organization. I'm just saying in general, you need to be aware that it's not just, I don't like this person, so I'm going to support that person. Make sure you know where they stand on positions that matter to you and make sure that your voice and you're putting your resources and effort into the things that really matter. We did have a comment that thank you so much for the templates. They were very easy to be able to communicate. So there's just a little bit of an endorsement to what's going
There's
on.
another question there, Baron. Can I quote you on that? We recommend you don't post video. Yeah, absolutely. You can quote us on that. That's the ACA's position. We don't want you posting videos.
Good. All right. Well, thank you so much for that, Dave. I appreciate it. And please stay plugged in, because as I get into what we're doing, I want to give you an opportunity to comment on that. So if you have anything you want to add, please raise your hand. So that's, again, repeating, that's how we got where we are today. That's the work that's being done. As I went around the town halls when I was in Australia in the middle of the year, I shared with you guys how important it is to have people come from different angles and different perspectives on issues like this, because we don't know the stance that everyone has. We don't know how strong someone's opinion is on something. So it's good to have a softer approach. And then there are some that you just need to slap them across the face to get their attention. And that's where we come in. But it is so important that both organizations are supported. Hopefully this webinar shows that we are in communication with each other. We may not always agree. We are two different organizations with two different government bodies. And so, but there is such a respect between us and the ACA and our integrity to allow them to do the work they do without encumbering that. Just so you guys are aware, one of our commitments is we always share with the ACA what we're doing before we do it, so that there's no surprise. And it gives them an opportunity to give us feedback as well. And I will tell you, over the last 4 years, there have been a number of times they've reached out and said, hey, Baron, you said this, maybe you need to do this. And it does correct my terminology. It does correct my stance on some things. So I'm very receptive to who they are. And we've done the same thing back to them. Hey, this is what we're hearing. We recommend that you guys look at this. So it's been a great relationship from a standpoint of communication and the roles. So I want people to know that organizations can work together that may have a completely different operation style, but on these big issues that matter to the profession on a global scale, it's imperative that we trust each other and we start coming together. So hopefully the fact that the ACA is represented by Dr. Dave Kill on this webinar is an example of that happening. So now I want to get into what we're doing. Because I'm not near as patient as most people when it comes to this stuff. I'm actually very agitated that we're still having this conversation this long. One of the questions that came in also was, what is the timeline? When are we waiting or expecting the health ministers to answer? The question is, we have no idea. This was supposed to be talked about in August. Then it was supposed to be talked about again in October. They have another meeting in December. I'm hearing back and forth that there's some election stuff going on, that there's a possibility it may not get talked about in December either, which is going to push it into the new year. Now, I will tell you, we're not going to let that happen ongoing. At some point, we are going to start writing letters saying, you guys need to make a decision one way or another. You can't leave this lingering. We also know, we are getting reports that we have some insurance companies that are aware of this policy now and have issued take back requests on rebates if you're adjusting children. Now, I want to be very, very clear. I have yet to found one of those that actually is substantiated where they are correct. When pushed back, it's been very successful to educate them that no, we are operating within the policy. We're not doing the high velocity, low amplitude on 2 and under. And they back off and say, oh, okay, yeah, that's fine. My point in it, though, is it's creating a perception out there that there's an issue with chiropractors treating children, which was my concern in the very beginning, because very few people actually read the details. All they see is chiropractors can't treat children. And so then all the insurance companies are like, well, wait a minute, this might be an opportunity for us not to pay. So that's my concern. That's just started to happen. And although if that is happening, please reach out to us or the ACA. We're both aware of it. There is a process for you to be able to push back on that, get your money. They have no right to keep it. There's a lot of variables. They would have to be very, very clear on details to be able to do that for you. And David, it looks like you have something.
Yeah. Thanks, Baron. Yeah, we've had some people contact us with that happening, and we've pushed back, and they say, oh, okay, no worries. So we'll be putting something in our pediatrics hub on that if you get a letter from the insurance company, here's what you say, and there it is. Okay.
Perfect.
If they had proof that you were breaking the law, and if you're doing an HVLA on an under 2 at the moment, you're breaking the law. or you're going counter to that directive by the registration board. Now, if they had proof that you're doing that, it may be a different issue, but that hasn't happened so far. And by and large, well, what it's been is I don't know, they're testing the water maybe, but as soon as we push back, they say no problem. Okay.
Yeah. So again, my concern with that from a global perspective is the fact that, again, this policy is now creating behavior outside of the care itself. And so we are in a position to do this. So we as you guys know, we reached out to you to try to raise some money because we wanted to hire a senior barrister. Where, it's just not cheap. It's not cheap to do the work that we're doing. But we want to be prepared, just as the ACA is preparing for all alternatives. So are we. And we fully expect to have to bring legal pressure on this issue. And we're preparing to do that. And we're having those conversations and we're working. So as I shared with you guys in the town halls, our stance is very much the same as it was in the mid-year. We are going to be coming from two perspectives. Number one, we are going to be putting legal pressure. We are going to hire the team. We are continuing to dig and educate them so that we're prepared. It was for the minute they have an answer one way or another, we would know how we would respond. At this point, it looks like we're probably going to have to put pressure to tell them they have to make a decision. They can't leave this lingering. As Samir will share in a minute, he shared with us pre-call that it also sets precedent. The longer we let this go, the longer that it appears that it's probably an okay thing. And so there needs to be some pressure put on there. And so we are in the process of preparing that pressure. We'll wait and see what happens in their meeting in December. But if it goes into the new year, we're likely going to be writing something, putting a little bit of pressure to say, okay, come on. You guys have had over 6 months to evaluate. You've been given ample information from chiropractic organizations. You have your opinion from the Chiro board. What are you going to do? And force them to put it on the docket, or at least put pressure. We can't force them to do anything. But that is part of our plan from a legal perspective. Should they decide to uphold the policy, meaning to put this policy back in place and go against the decision of the Chiro board, which means all 7 of these health ministers agreed. There was a unanimous decision. This policy is what's appropriate for Australia. We will immediately file against that decision because, again, there is zero evidence. And that's why we've been preparing and spending the money we've been spending to get our team prepared for such an action. So we've been ready for that since August when we thought this was going to get talked about at that point. So we are ready for that. We also, as I shared with you, believe the real strength is going to be on the PR front. So we have hired a PR firm. The PR firm, we're starting to give them the material for them to just get educated on the history of this. I want to be very clear. I was clear in the town halls. I want to be very clear here. We are not hiring a PR firm to go out and tell the story of chiropractic. That is not the objective here. The PR firm is very specific to just simply tell the story of this pediatric issue and how we believe chiropractic has been targeted, and media has been driving most of this, not the facts. And so we will be communicating with the ACA on that before anything goes out. We will be communicating with you guys. Our goal is not to create chaos. Our goal is not to create more drama, but we are adamant that we have to take that narrative back. And there needs to be things that you guys can give to your patients that tell this story of why it is safe and why it is ethical. What is the actual facts about the Safer Care Victoria document, so that we can use the same game that FOSM and the medics have been using against us, coordinated media, where if you remember back in it was about March, I think. It was one day that all 5 media outlets reported the exact same thing at the same time. And that's what got the storm going again to get the policy reinstated. So we want to use the same thing. And we want to use a PR company to be able to go to the media to tell a story, the other side of the story. Well, did you know there was a document that was created, over 20-some thousand responses, 99.7% of them positive, all that kind of stuff, all the factual things that are necessary, and really hit that front to tell this story about how we've been targeted as a profession because of other agendas other than the safety of the general public. So we are going to do both of those things. We've been waiting because I want to make sure that we know the environment that we're doing it in, because the environment does shift. If they do what they should do, which is decide, okay, we've looked at this and that policy needs to be removed, there is still going to be a PR campaign, but it is not going to be as aggressive as far as attacking. It's going to be saying, here's our story. And again, we've proven that there is safety and efficacy with chiropractic, right? The narrative shifts a little bit to make sure that we're telling the story in a way that doesn't reinstigate an issue. But this is still a phenomenal opportunity right now to tell that story in Australia, and it needs to be told. And it needs to be told in a very in a massive manner, which is why we're doing the work that we're doing. So depending on the response that comes back, if there isn't a response, we will push it. Secondly, we are doing a PR campaign, or going to be doing a PR campaign alongside that everybody will be a part of. This is not us trying to be cavalier. This is us just putting the money into it and, you know, having and keeping a degree of separation from other organizations so that they can raise their hand and say, hey, it wasn't us. And it doesn't hurt any of those relationships on the other side. We don't have those relationships, so I don't care about those as far as it relates to their opinion of our organization. Samir, I do want to let you kind of talk a little bit from the conversations that you've had with the senior barrister, kind of the work that we've done, your perspective from a legal angle, and again, your opinion of what we need to do and why it's so important that we organize. So go ahead and share your opinion of all that.
So basically, we've looked at a couple of different avenues on how to attack it and where to go. One or two are stronger. I should say a couple. We've looked at several, but one or two are stronger than the others. And judicial review is where we're kind of stuck at the moment. That seems to be the most effective way forward, especially when the evidence against, or the evidence for the policy is minimal to non-existent. And that goes back to what Baron said earlier, and what David's already said earlier, there really was nothing that brought this policy into light except for an attack effectively on you guys and chiropractors in general. Now, we're in a current situation where I wouldn't say we're in limbo per se, but we're kind of waiting on seeing what they do. But ultimately, we need to do something in the next few months. I would say, Baron, 2 to 3 months tops, because if they don't move and this policy, even though it's meant to be temporary, stays in place, it is going to become something more permanent. And if no one challenges a temporary policy and it sits there longer and longer, it's going to look like it's doing its job. And eventually it's going to become something that effectively could become permanent. So I think in the next 2 or 3 months, some action is going to be taken, or has to be taken really, because if we don't, we're going to leave it too late. It's just a matter of where we lodge, how we lodge, and how we start. We're pretty confident in the action that we want to take, and the judicial review being the first cause. How are we going to do it? Is it as individuals? Is it as a collective? That's something that we need to work out and move forward on. But the first thing would be, I guess, figuring out when we actually shoot and when we actually fire ourselves. At this point, Baron, do they, or David, maybe you can answer this better, are they expecting a challenge? I suppose not yet. They must have heard something about it, because it has been
expecting
talking, right?
a legal challenge. I don't know what they're expecting, Samir. We're not inside their heads. But I agree with what you're saying. Yeah, this can't just linger on and on. Although it did go 4.5 years before they came back with the second one. Can I answer a couple of questions that came up, because it brings up, I think, a really important point.
I was about to do the same thing. So yeah, go ahead while you're talking. Yeah.
The one, can we have a differentiation between manual adjusting and doing other low force techniques? The answer is no, because, and we've tested the water on this in some of the meetings we've had to try and explain some of the subtleties and the nuances of chiropractic care and chiropractic adjusting versus a gross manipulation. And the difficulty, well, there's a danger, okay? And the danger is, well, let me take a step back. There are some chiropractors, quite a few, that believe we should just say, yes, no manipulation of children under 2, but we do something different. We do this. We use very low force, gentle things. The trouble is, giving ground on that means you're giving ground on our scope of practice, and we're giving ground. It's not an evidence-based decision, and where they're encroaching on our scope of practice without evidence to do so. So to give ground on that is potentially the thin edge of the wedge. That's why we cannot do that. So, so to differentiate between this and that, it just doesn't work practically when you're trying to explain it to decision makers and people who aren't clinical. You very quickly get lost in detail and terminology which they don't understand. So it's like, no, there's no evidence for this, period.
Right.
Okay. We've shown the evidence is that we're very safe. We have an extraordinary safety record. So that's it.
Yep.
Okay. And evidence, we're also very much what we're doing is trying to educate them on coming out of the Safer Care Victoria review. The narrative amongst the ministers in their departments seem to be, well, there's no evidence to support what you do. Well, that's not true. There's no evidence if you set the bar at an extraordinary high level. Well, little, but as there is with everything else. But if you, there is a lot and a growing body of evidence, and there's also a maturity of our profession and how we've responded to the Safer Care Victoria review. We've funded the review that was done by Genevieve Keating and Cheryl Hawke, which produced consensus guidelines. We've been very responsible in how we've handled this, and that's been a terrific thing to be able to talk about with them. That's what they want to see. They want to see that we're being responsible, and we're also pushing the view that we have a very responsible registration board. They have a long history of being responsible and regulating our profession in a very in a mature way, and coming down very hard on people that step out of line, as they should. So they're the body that the ministers have put in place. That's the body they should be listening to, because they've got the expertise. So we've been very much pushing that, and they have to give their recommendations according to the evidence, in our view. I don't believe they can do anything else but that. So the restriction of scope of practice is a real issue, and that's why we don't want to separate manual adjustments from other adjustments, if you know what I mean.
Yep. No, great answer. The other one, Dave, while you're still talking, there was a question: is it true that they're looking to extend the policy to kids 12 and under?
Yeah.
This has been come up for a while because of the opinion of the Safer Care Victoria document, but I don't know that that's actually in discussion.
No, that's not on the table right now. But again, if you were to let 0 to 2 go, well,
where do you stop?
Where does it stop? So that's the issue with that. But no, that's not on the table right now. So you can take away that fear at the moment.
Yeah, no, and I agree with that 100%. We've had those conversations, and that's where that came from, was because of the recommendations at the end of the Safer Care Victoria document. They were using the Safer Care Victoria, or excerpts of it, to support part of what was going on in the media campaign, right? That's where all that stuff came from. But I agree with you. Like, first of all, your answer on the techniques was brilliant, and I agree 1,000,000%. But guys, this is why I'm so adamant. You need to understand, when we allow, and this is why we're spending the money, because we're not bringing in enough from Australia to pay for what we're putting into Australia, right? I mean, that's the way our organization is created. I was hoping at this point that we would be in a better position than we are, but it doesn't change the fact that we will not stop doing this, because if this is successful in Australia, you can darn well expect that this is going to go around the rest of the world. Like, we cannot allow this stuff to happen anywhere. That's the whole existence of our organization, is to defend the rights of practicing chiropractors all over the world, because we're anywhere that it can get a ground. The same with x-ray issues in Canada. We're fighting it very hard, because if it's successful to stay there, then it's going to spread in other parts of the world. So we cannot give ground, especially when the ground they're taking is unacceptable. I mean, there's, like Dr. Cahill said, there's not one shred of evidence of harm being done to a child. The only one they can pull up is not even factual either. A doctor was accused, and come to find out, it had nothing to do with the care the chiropractor provided. It had to do with a congenital anomaly. So we need to, this is not an option. We have to stand our ground. And I know that is not the way that Australians operate. I know you guys don't like to buck the system. I get it. we're willing to buck the system for you, meaning the ACA and us. We're willing to do the work that needs to be done so that you're not the tip of the spear. But guys, we can't do it if we don't have people engaged. If you're not connected to us, and yes, the economics is part of it. We're spending a ridiculous amount of money right now in Australia, and we'll continue to figure out how to do it. But it's the numbers, as Dave said earlier. If the ACA can go into these political meetings and say there are 6,600 chiropractors and we represent 4,000 of them, do you have any idea the power that that has to be able to get them to hear their points? The same for us. When we're fighting and we're being the guys poking the bear and we say we're representing 4,000 chiropractors, it makes people sit down and talk to us. One, because it's votes. If we have access to 4,000, that's not just 4,000, that's 4,000 in all of their patients. That's a huge representation of Australia for an election. But secondly, it shows that we have the mainstream of the profession that we're representing. So Dave, it looked like you wanted to say a couple things.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you. I reiterate that. And if I can take my ACA hat off for a minute and put my David chiropractor from East Melbourne in Victoria, I've been a member of the CDC since the inception, and that's the way I see it. Okay. But so yeah, we when you're talking to politicians, it matters. Representation matters. So please talk to your people who aren't members. Just there was another question there. What is considered an HVLA activator manual pediatric drop piece? And that question highlights the difficulty once you get into that, because it's very difficult. But bottom line is any of those are high velocity. So they could be considered that, and it becomes a grey area if there was someone was challenged legally. So hence, we want to get this whole interim ban removed, and not get into detail about this adjustment, that adjustment.
Perfect. Good. All right. Well, Samir, we kind of cut you off there. Did you have any other points on the legal front there, or did you feel like you covered what you needed?
No, I think it's covered.
Okay, perfect. All right, guys. Well, we're at an hour right now. So I'm gonna kind of tie this up here at the end. Hopefully we've addressed all your questions. It seems like we have, based on the questions that are coming in. I will address this last one because it fits. There's a question that just came in. Why is Fossum being allowed to swing such a big bat? And why have they not been discredited long before this issue ever arose? You are leading me into my conclusion better than I could have myself. The reason that they have the bat that they're swinging is because they're organized, they have resources, and they're very calculating in the way that they go about it. That's why. And you can't stop that. I mean, I know America is a land of excess and we're a bunch of arrogant blowhards. And I concur. Now that I'm starting to travel around the world, I agree with you. We are all of those things. But the reason that we're as powerful as we are is because we do organize. We have the freedom to come together and to boycott things, to protest, to say, we don't agree. And if you can get a large enough group of people to do that and you have the resources, you will be successful. It's just the way that things have always happened. It's how we became a country and we kicked England out of the Americas. I need you to understand Fossum is as effective as they are because they're just a group of people that put money in and they're willing to go and poke bears and target different things and be aggressive at it. Chiropractic has been a victim of this for so long because we fail to organize. Like literally, I mean, the ACA is your largest group and they still don't represent half of the profession. Like how do you expect an organization to be able to really represent, stand up and beat down the people they need to beat down when they don't have the people or the resources to do it? So if the profession of chiropractic would just get engaged, do you know, to be a member of the ACA and to support us is like 2.5 visits a month. That's the economic impact to you to do that. Like and that's insane to me that our profession, based on principles, has decided we're not going to belong because we don't agree to this one thing. This is an opportunity for our profession to stand up on an issue we all agree with, at least anyone that has a competent brain. And yes, that's an insult to anyone that thinks that we should allow this policy to exist. We should all agree on this one issue, that there should not be a restriction on any level about efficacy and safety for chiropractic with children. Should not exist because there's not a shred of evidence to support it. If we can't all come together for that and that alone, then there really is no hope for us to ever have the strength of an organization like FOSUM. This isn't a money grab, but guys, we have an opportunity right now if we can come together. Our whole structure as the CDC was a bunch of people doing a little bit. We were able to do that during COVID. We were right around 1,000 people that were connected to us. And as Samir already shared with you, it worked because we had the numbers in certain areas. And even sometimes when they have bigger weapons, if we just have the sheer volume of people, their weapons don't work. And that's exactly what we're proving. We're proving that right now with the censorship issues. If we could have thousands of people doing what we're asking you to do, our ability to change the reality of how opera translates or interprets their policy is very big. We can actually alter that without having to legislatively go in and change something. There's a way to do this that works. It's been proven in other parts of the world over and over and over again. But I need you guys to help. We need to go viral. And I know those of you on this, we're preaching to the choir. Most of you are members of the ACA. Most of you are contributors to the CDC. But what I'm asking of you is to go and spread this to your colleagues and create an environment where you're not the cool kid if you're not at the table. And if we can create that environment, our ability to stand up and represent chiropractic and be as powerful as FOSUM, put FOSUM in their place because now they have somebody that's willing to punch back when they throw a jab. That's how we change this reality. And that's what I meant when I started this webinar by saying we have an opportunity to take back the narrative of chiropractic in Australia. All we need is people getting involved. For 2.5 patients a month, you can support the organizations that can do this work for you, and you can continue to focus on what you need to focus on, which is just practicing, serving your communities, and growing the access to chiropractic. So if you're not a member of either organization, please go immediately and join and help us both economically and joining the masses so that we can represent effectively. For those of you on here, as we're getting ready to do these legal things, we are still trying to raise for our senior barrister to get that done. We haven't raised everything that we need to raise at this point. If you have it in you and you have the capacity, I would greatly appreciate you going to our site, giving a one-time contribution to support. I hate doing that. Either tell other people to join, or if you have the capacity to help us, I would greatly appreciate it because we're, as Samir said, we're getting ready to gear up to do something and make this thing move. And all of that stuff takes resources. So I would greatly appreciate that. But I'm going to leave you with this. At the end of the day, God is in control. And all we can do is just take advantage of the opportunities that he gives us to be able to make a difference. I know chiropractic's time is coming. What's happening in the United States has got me so excited with RFK coming in to be our director of Health and Human Services, and his goal to eradicate vaccinations, his goal to bring health back to America is going to spread throughout the rest of the world. It's already happening, and Trump isn't even sworn in yet. We have a golden age for the next 4 years where America can really drive a lot of what's happening around health around the rest of the world. You're going to see some amazing things happen with the gutting of the CDC, the FDA, all of these things, a rewriting of what health looks like and how the governments are going to pay for it. We are entering an amazing time in history for chiropractic and the way that it is viewed as a part of mainstream healthcare. Now's the time to get engaged and involved. Please put aside your biases. Please put aside your old issues of Hatfield and McCoy and arguing over techniques and philosophies. Now's our time to come together because we have an incredible opportunity to make chiropractic part of the mainstream healthcare without compromising our values and our beliefs. Let me be clear, but now's our time, but we need you. We need you engaged. So keep loving, keep serving. Dr. Cahill, thank you so much for taking the time this evening. Samir, thank you so much for your time and your work. And those of you that don't know, Samir was one of the only guys when we were in the middle of COVID that was willing to stick his neck out and defend the little guy. And he did it brilliantly. So he is a champion for chiropractic. And I am so honored that he's on our team. So Samir, thank you so much for your commitment to what we're doing and your the vigor that you have in representing our issues. So the rest of you, God bless you. If I haven't answered your question, I will, but I'm going to cut off due to time. We love you. We appreciate you. God bless you. And thanks for loving what we love. Have a great night, guys.